We should talk about rugby.
Happily.
Take your victory.
Scene
lap.
of the crime.
Take your victory. There was no crime. I resent and reject your framing of that.
What was it you said to me last year, Ger? Was it, we'll have no problem beating South Africa at a quarter-final?
Well, I mean, I would stand by that. History is not there to prove me wrong.
I go to sleep watching that clip from last year these days. You know?
I'm sure you do. Well, I don't know. Other people use the internet for other things when they're on their way to sleep, you know, but I get what you're saying.
No, inevitable, I guess. And you know what? We're doing it again. I picked up Jerry Thornley a couple of weeks ago after the first round of Champions Cup games, and I guess ultimate delusion involves the redemption story, and it's begun already. He talked about, what was it he said? He said, our physicality was never a problem at the World Cup. This after we couldn't last with Japan for 80 minutes and New Zealand absolutely bullied us. And he said kind of the redemption is beginning here. Very early this time.
Well, I suppose, you know, the professional rugby will continue in Ireland, and they will try and do things differently and try and get over
though.
They will try and get over that.
That was my point a year ago, that we weren't doing things differently and it would end up in the same result.
But I think we were doing things differently at that point, and since then we didn't.
I don't know. I think we were going late DVDs. Celebrating friendlies, and I'll tell you what.
Should you not celebrate life as you go?
No.
Why not?
Real winners do not need hyperbole. And this whole de facto world champions team of 2018, we were a laughing stock at the World Cup. People laugh at
they were
the English soccer team.
They were literally the team. So look, the English soccer team is a very good example, and it's probably a good comparison. And we're now at that stage, I think. But I don't think we were there until England beat the shit out of us in the Six Nations. That was the harbinger of doom. From that point on, the team never recovered. But like, there literally is a celebration at the end of every year where they do hand out a Team of the Year award, and they did get the Team of the Year. Like, there was a gala dinner. You can't not show up.
I get that, but there is a great. I mean, Luka Modric wasn't paraded through the streets of Croatia after the Ballon d'Or. You know, I mean, it's kind of Was he not the equivalent of that? I mean, obviously there was a massive court case ongoing at that point where he was accused of treason. There was that too.
But apart from that, I think that they did.
Okay, I think I said, let me put it.
Massive celebration. Certainly when they finished third in the World Cup.
It was in Portugal, and Portugal did they win the Nations Cup or whatever that is?
Well, they won the Euros, didn't they?
What's the other thing? The Nations Cup.
The most recent thing.
Yeah.
They beat England in the final.
Netherlands beat Netherlands in the final. I think.
Right,
England third place player.
Okay, right.
But they don't. I mean, it's kind of
that's a shitty tournament. No one cares about it.
If you want to be, and we talk about Ireland, Ireland's rugby team being superstars, golden generations, all these things. Well, then, if they want to be put at that level, then they need to measure themselves at the one tournament where everybody shows up, having prepped for it brilliantly.
Yeah.
And again, they lay down. They lay down.
Well, they failed.
And we celebrated and danced and sang and hugged and kissed and called them heroes.
No one called them heroes after that. They got a kicking. Like, you've got to admit,
finally, they did get a kicking. They did, finally. Although then Joe Schmidt shows up in the Late Late. Again, I'm back to the Late Late. I watched too much of it. Standing ovation.
Yeah,
incredible.
Well, Brian just got one too in the same piece.
I know.
Well, like, he's our greatest ever player. So I just think the Late Late Show, the people in the Late Late Show are not the arbiter of exactly what's happening. They're liquored up.
No, I know that, but there is. I mean, a standing ovation for Joe Schmidt after an abysmal year where he actually, I mean, again, talking about writing a book, to write a book by yourself in a World Cup year is lunacy. The time that takes, the effort it takes, even if you were... I was talking to Eddie O'Sullivan last night, and he talked about the time, even when Vincent Hogan did his book, that the amount of time and effort it took, and he had Vincent, a professional writer, doing it. For Joe to do that in a World Cup year is absolutely mad.
I have a feeling a good bit of it was done 18 months out with the Ma. Him and the mother were writing it, the early parts of it. So there was really only... It seems... I don't know if you've read it. You probably haven't. So
I read the Vodafone quote at the start.
There's a good section of the book is a World Cup or a Grand Slam diary and a World Cup diary. So that's like some thoughts. It's like Doogie Howser MD at the end of the day typing on the computer as opposed to... Still though, I mean, it is a great... There's no matter how bad a book is, no matter how much of it is done before, it is a time-consuming and exhausting process to write a book. It's absolutely... Never mind on top of what should be a really time-consuming and exhausting. I think Joe Schmidt said, I work 7 days a week. Yeah, I don't sleep. Well, obviously, how much of that was on the book? Yeah, I don't know. Not that much. I don't think.
Well, it can't be true if you have found time to write a book to begin with, and the end results weren't great.
I don't think anybody thinks that he didn't do enough work. I think it's like the opposite. If anything, Schmidt did a lot of and got in the weeds and seems to have got lost in the weeds in the preparation of it and forgot the bit that made him a good coach.
Yet the game plan didn't change. I mean, how lost in the weeds are you when everyone knew how we were going to play a year out and were prepared for it and changed nothing? Same players, nothing changed there. Too loyal maybe there. Same game plan, no plan B.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's disputing that the game plan needed to evolve more, except maybe Schmidt. But like the next coach is going to change the game plan because they have to, because the game evolves. But sorry, are you critical of Schmidt or are you critical of?
I'm critical of Schmidt's last year. His decision to call time when he did, to write a book, to not change the game plan, to stick with the same team, and to get a World Cup atrociously wrong. I'd be very critical of that. The same way I'd say, well done on the Grand Slam.
I don't think the book had anything to do with it, to be honest. I think
if it didn't, it still looks very bad. When I mean, why did he need to call time on Ireland when he did? Why did he need to write the book now and have it come out now?
I don't think the calling time mattered, right? But because Eamon Sweeney had that line from the get-go saying that he thought this was lame duck territory. But it happens in rugby quite a bit where you come to the end of your 4-year cycle and people are saying, are you staying on or going? You can continue to go, I make that decision after the World Cup, make that decision after. Well, if you don't have a contract, you're definitely going. So everybody knows. Like, does it really matter that much?
Optics again, though.
Is it? Like,
yeah,
for who?
I think so.
For the players?
Well, for him, I think, having failed now, it all comes back on him and looks very bad. I mean, it's very hard to champion a guy after a bad World Cup who's releasing a book having said he's quitting a year ago. I mean, it just doesn't look good, which is a pity because he did a lot of good stuff over the years.
Yeah, so on balance, you think?
Ultimately, I mean, people will talk about the Grand Slam. He was a failure at 2 World Cups. I think that has to stand against him hugely. I mean, I don't think he can be champion to the level he is when you fail at not 1, 2 World Cups with the same mistakes at both.
I don't think there are that many people championing or are giving him a free pass for that. Like, is the standing ovation enough to say that people are giving him a free pass when I don't know any of the rugby hacks who've given him a free pass?
No, and they've stood up, to be fair, mostly, for a change, I would say, and that was quite refreshing. But I think in general, I mean, if I look back at his tenure, I mean, how much does 2 bad World Cups stand against 1 Grand Slam?
I think ultimately you look back and say that was a really brilliant team who chronically underperformed twice. Now, the first World Cup, there is some mitigating factors with the fact that they played brilliantly up to the point where 5 players got injured in the last game against France. The squad wasn't deep enough and their defence fell apart against Argentina, so that's...
And this time, because when we talked a year ago, you said, finally, we have depth, we've addressed all these issues.
Yeah, we did, and we had. So we had everything, like, here's the thing, right? I think that they need to have a complete analysis of exactly why this happened. It looks like they're not going to. They're going to say, we got the last year wrong because we focused on the World Cup too far out. I don't think that's a good enough answer. I actually think that they had created enough depth and they should have done much better. And why they didn't is the bit that they need to find out. And unless they analyse that properly, then they're likely to make the same mistakes again.
I think they also need to overhaul the system, and I've said this before, genuinely. I think they need to branch out from this being private school driven, because I think GAA is in trouble. I think soccer's name is mud at the minute, really. And I think there's a huge opening, and I think rugby must be missing out on an awful lot of potentially very good players by not giving them the pathway. I know there are exceptions. Everyone will say Tyke Furlong, Sean O'Brien, all these things.
Yeah, no, but they need more of them. They need way more
of them. And because when, again, the World Cup squad, 70% of the Republic of Ireland educated players went to private schools, when 1%, I think, of the country actually goes to private school. So how many guys are you missing out on and not giving them that opportunity? And I think after all the marketing, all the hype, all the hysteria for 15 years around rugby in this country now, that hasn't changed radically, I think is a huge missed opportunity for rugby. So
they put figures out this week, and in fairness, Gordon Darcy had an interesting column about it where he was making exactly the same point, that it's growing slowly, but they need to love bomb that. They need to have a massive injection of cash into it. He made the point that he wrote the same column 4 years previously, and that if they'd invested that money 4 years previously, then you'd have 13 to 17-year-olds, 18 to 19-year-olds who had actually flipped from being GAA players. So, look, I mean, you would assume they know that, though, right?
Yeah, and I'd hope so. I just don't understand why they stick with this. Is it an old boys' club? Is it a lack of money? It just... I went through the academy figures even. This isn't shit. Like the Leinster Academy, again, 70% of players. Munster, 70% of players are private schools.
Yeah, but it's hard. Like, it's like...
It is, but I mean, if you want it should be hard, but it's necessary.
Yeah, so like they've had a program running out in Tala for about 10 years. I don't know if anybody's actually come through it and made it to the professional game. But is success exclusively based on the fact that you'll end up having half the team at the senior level, or is it that you get great administrators in those clubs and the sport grows over 40 years? Like, is this a short-term thing that you can just put a lot of money in? Like, and if that's the case, do we just not end up becoming British cycling, where it's like, get me the fucking gold medals and I don't care how you get it?
Well, I think rugby is doing well, but like rugby almost as a pastime is doing well at a lot of clubs throughout the country. But then the elite game is hugely different. I mean, they're spending most of their money on the provinces. Very little is going down. And you can see why most players come through the private schools, because they have the money for expert coaching, all these things. They need to get coaches, and schools are crying out with the lack of funding. There's lack of sport in schools. They're desperate for, be it GAA, be it rugby, for anyone to send anyone into these and take their kids. And that's where you start doing it. I mean, you have to plough money into expert coaches. Tony Ward shouldn't be just in Blackrock. Tony Ward should be in Athy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, in fairness, like, Joey Carberry obviously comes from Athy, although he ends up in Blackrock for that 1 year. I don't really count him as a Blackrock student, given that the vast majority of his schooling happens.
But isn't he a case in point, the fact that he had to go to Blackrock to make that final leap?
Well, I don't think he did. I think that he was so good that they selected him. So that happens as well. The other issue, right, is that and Darcy pointed this out last week, is you cannot play for a club if you're any good in Dublin and you're going to a school. The school has first dibs on you, and that's the issue. And he's like, until we actually break that. So if you go to Terran and you're brilliant and you're with all your mates in club rugby up to 12, and you go to school from 12 to 18, you're no longer a club member, you're a school member. And he's like, look, I mean, he's sitting here, he's talking about his book on, he's still very close with all his school friends, but like his rugby club is not the thing that he becomes identified with. That system is there designed so that the schools end up getting all the best players. The benefit of that is that they get incredible coaching. And like I suspect most of those brilliant rugby players don't end up paying fees because they end up getting scholarships.
But and that's a problem in itself, that unless you're incredibly good at 13 or 14 to be picked up by the schools, or unless your parents are incredibly wealthy, you're lost. So how many kind of guys develop at 16, 17 that could have made it and are lost? I mean, Gordon's from Wexford, is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he ended up in a Dublin school, so why? I mean, why does that route have to take place? Because what if Gordon developed 2 years later, or his parents were rich, or whatever case it was? He would have been lost. And how many more of them are being lost by that system?
Yeah, so Ewan was in town to promote his new book, Chaos is a Friend of Mine, about Conor McGregor, and you can get that in all good bookstores. There's more of that stuff which you can see. The full interview is up on youtube.com/offtheball.